Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Now we're going to talk about organizing our file. There's several things I would say not wrong, but to be aware of when you start making a scene more complex that has many objects in it, like this one. So first of all, have I applied my scale on everything? I haven't, so I'm going to just select all of these objects, Control and A, and apply scale. Do I want to apply my rotations? No, not at the moment, because if I go and scale any of these and I want to change their local width or height or depth, I won't be able to do that. So I'll keep their rotations, but I've applied their scales. Excellent. So now we've got that bit of organization out of the way. Let's have a look at our hierarchy, our outliner here. Now, when you're just throwing something together, it can be very tempting to just throw caution to the wind and end up with a hierarchy that looks like this. This is absolutely useless. This doesn't convey any information to me. So when I come back and I look at this in a week's time or even a month's time, or you're working with someone else, they'll hate you if you've not done some sort of organization. Now, it may be like this. Let's say we've got all of these objects, and they don't need to be all separate objects anymore. We could join some together. I'm not going to join them all together because I want to show you some different techniques for making things random in a moment. But what we could do, for instance, is select these three objects and join them together as one object. And that will cut down the number of objects in the scene, make them easier to organize, easier to name. When we join these together in a moment, you'll notice that whichever one is the active selected object, that is the origin that all of the other objects that are selected will inherit, and then it will just be merged into one object. So if I was going to merge this into one object, I'd probably want the top one because that's central to the model, and then I'll just press Control and J, or go to the object menu and go to join, and now we have one solid object, which is really useful for organization. It's less objects to organize. Naming. Naming's important. I've already mentioned cube is not only a bad name for this because everything else is called cube, but it really doesn't describe what this object actually is. So I'd have been much better before I duplicated and everything else to name it in the first place. You see, now renaming this lot's going to be a pain in the backside to do. So name your work early and name it appropriately for what the task is. Let's just say I wanted to rename this monument. I can double click over here, I can press F2 when I'm in the outliner, or indeed if you've got the properties window open, providing you're on the object properties tab, we can also rename it here. So let's just call it monument for the moment. So it's got a name. So we've talked about naming, we've talked about joining things together, but you'll notice that all of this stuff is in something called a collection. So we've got two distinct areas here. We've got this ring and then we've got the walkway. So what I could do is select all of these objects that make up the ring and then move them into a collection, a new collection, separate to this original one. There are a couple of ways that we can do that, but with them all selected, we can go to the object menu, go to collection, and we can see here we can move it to a collection, or M for shortcut. We go ahead and we can select new collection. Now this bit of UI has a bit of a quirk to it. I'm going to call it ring and I'm going to click OK. And we can see if we scroll down now, there's a new collection called ring, which is really useful because it contains 16 objects. We can see that are mesh objects, and we can collapse it, which is even better. It enables us to organize our scene much more easily. Okay, next thing, I want to select this walkway. I'm going to look from the top and select it in the lamp selected. I'm going to look at it from the side, nope, the front, and then I try and select these, and the camera's selected as well. So how do I go ahead and stop these two objects from being selected? Well, in the object data properties, with the camera selected, I can go down to visibility, and there's a checkbox here for selectable, and I can turn that off. You can also get at it under the filter option for the outliner. If we click on that, we've got a couple of options in terms of visibility, and one that catches people out all the time. Not only is the viewport visibility, which is this monitor icon, so I'm going to turn that on at the moment, but also this camera icon. This is disabling in a render. This can be very powerful. It enables us to toggle what we can see in our final render and what we can't see, but you can also end up with placeholders appearing if you've forgotten and left them turned on. I'm not going to turn that on at the moment because we're going to play with that when we get to rendering our scene in a bit later. But for the moment, you might not want things to be selectable. That is this arrow icon. So we can turn off their visibility in the viewports and their visibility in renders, which we can see down here showing viewports and renders. And we can also turn on and off whether something's selectable. So if I do that to the lamp as well, now when I select my walkway or the pieces that I want in my walkway, we can see that the camera and lamp remain unselected. I'm going to press M, new collection, and this time I'm going to go walkway. And when I press enter, nothing happens. This is the quirk in the UI. Before I clicked OK. Now I've pressed enter. I'm going to have to press enter again. So there's 2 presses of the enter in order to solidify that. And look at this. This is a much easier to understand hierarchy. We have a ring and we have a walkway. And we can even select our individual areas. So let's deselect everything. Let's go to the select menu and select none, or Alt and A. Then we can go ahead and right click on the ring and select those objects. And there we go, they've come back again. Real quick way of organizing our scene. The final one that I'm going to touch upon and we'll come back to again and again later on is parenting. So if I move my ring or any objects in here, this is the problem. You see, I have to select all of these objects in order to move everything at once. But I could parent everything to one object, and then all the children, all the other objects, will inherit an object's position, its scale, or its rotation. So for argument's sake, let's select this object at the front, the one that's a solid object that we joined all together. And we've got all of these other selected objects ready to parent to this main one here. So we can go to Object, Parent, and just parent it to an object, or Control and P. Now you see all of these relationship lines coming to this front runner. And if I press G, all of the parent's children follow it around. If I scale the parent, everything else will scale. If I rotate the parent, all the children will follow. This is the important thing about inheritance, and it can be confusing because if I go to any of the children and scale, rotate, or move them, they won't affect each other, nor will they affect the parent. But the parent will pass down any of those transforms. And finally, if I wanted to, I think I might want to, I link the walkway, let's say to the front one, Control and P, Object. So they're now all parented, but I can also parent this front object to the main one over here. So you can have multiple inheritance, essentially a family tree. So we have this object here, which has all of these children, but it is also a child of the main one here, which means if I've got this main one selected, I can scale everything at once. If I've just got this front one of the walkway selected, it will only affect its children. And now this is incredibly useful because I can move this as a whole. Perfect. So I think we've now got a lot of information. We've played around, we're able to manipulate, we can build things, we can make sure they're accurate and they're precisely located. And we can even add a bit of organicness by moving things around, rotating them slightly, etc. And there's going to be one final thing before we get to your midsection challenge, and we'll do that in the next lecture.